Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman for his questions, and I know it must be really, really difficult to sit there while we have just agreed this fantastic trade deal and find a way to celebrate. Just looking at the Labour front bench, it looks like they've been sucking on lemons, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Let's be honest, gravity matters, geography matters. How are you going to substitute trade deals across the other side of the world with losing trade with your next door neighbours? I just find this whole shebang absolutely bonkers. But anyway, let's listen with mirth and hilarity. Enjoy.
Nick Symonds.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm of course grateful to the Secretary of State for advance sight of her statement. But having listened, Madam Deputy Speaker, the detail on this is paper thin. The published negotiating strategy from the UK government was very limited, and even the policy paper that was published alongside the announcement on 31st of March is very general indeed. And the Secretary of State herself has been on the airwaves questioning the projections of her own department that this offers 0.08% to our GDP. And whilst there has finally been progress in the CPTPP accession talks, this does not make up for the failure to deliver the India trade deal or indeed the US trade deal promised by the end of last year. And perhaps the Secretary of State can tell us when that US deal could be completed, given that now negotiations are not even expected to begin until 2025. Now, we on these benches, Madam Deputy Speaker, are pro-trade, pro-business and pro-worker. And accessing new markets is essential. And of course, I welcome that. And why is that particularly welcome? It's particularly welcome because of their dreadful record on trade. The OBR forecast is that UK exports are due to fall by 6.6% this year, and that's a hit of over £51 billion to the UK economy. That will only further impact on our public services, already under incredible pressure, and make the cost of living crisis even worse. So what exactly ministers have agreed to in these accession talks will need to be scrutinised carefully. Because I've watched government ministers come into this chamber and laud trade deals only for them to go away and criticise them when they've left office, or in the Prime Minister's case, when he was temporarily out of office, when he said the Australia deal was one-sided. Now, having slipped out this announcement on the last day before recess, of course, it's great the Secretary of State is here, but answers are needed. Now, firstly, other countries joining CPTPP have secured important safeguards and put in place support for their producers. It's vital ministers set out the details of what they've negotiated. The Secretary of State, in her statement, mentioned all trade deals involve a quid pro quo, but she didn't actually say what that was in respect of CPTPP. Specifically, New Zealand put in place side letters with all other signatories to opt out of the investor-state dispute settlement mechanism, which could give investors from abroad the right to sue the government for choosing to regulate in a particular area. Now, the government seems to have excluded ISDS with Australia and New Zealand, but not with the other countries. Why have they done that? And what assurance can the Secretary of State give that it can legislate in the interest of the British people without threats of being sued under this mechanism? On agriculture, the Secretary of State mentioned the maintaining of certain protections. But can she be more specific? What particular support will the government offer to the agricultural sector, and when, particularly given the strong feeling that ministers sold out our farmers to get the Australia deal over the line? Have specific conditions been put in place to address concerns around the import of palm oil, which has been linked to deforestation? And Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State didn't even mention the devolved governments in her statement. Could she set out what engagement she proposes to have with them? And what detailed assurances can the government provide that the CPTPP arrangement will not undermine the Windsor framework? The Secretary of State also mentioned our influence as a member of CPTPP. We know China applied to join in September 2021. So what assurances on economics and security have ministers asked for from existing members in respect of that application. The Secretary of State also mentioned the chapters in CPTPP, including on workers' rights, but you will also know the concerns on this in particular member countries. How will ministers give assurances that the highest possible workers' rights are adhered to ensure UK workers are operating on a fair playing field and that vulnerable workers internationally are not facing exploitation? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, given that estimate, I know the Secretary of State doesn't accept it, that this is worth 0.08% to our GDP, rather than debate that figure, what proactive steps will the government now take to support our exporters to ensure that figure is driven up?
I'm looking forward to these answers. No doubt she'll go off on a tangent and talk utter drivel, as always.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman for his questions, and I know it must be really, really difficult to sit there while we have just agreed this fantastic trade deal and find a way to celebrate. Just looking at the Labour front bench, it looks like they've been sucking on lemons, Madam Deputy Speaker. And quite frankly, I'm thrilled to be able to answer pretty much all of his questions. So the first thing to emphasise is that he's claiming that this has happened at the expense of the India Free Trade Agreement. And quite frankly, I've stood at this dispatch box and told him that it is about the deal, not the day. I know that the Labour front bench would like us to rush into a deal that doesn't get the best for this country so that they can have something to criticise, but we are not going to do that. We are going to negotiate a free trade agreement that is of mutual benefit and that meets the needs of both UK and Indian citizens.
I thought all these countries would be falling over themselves to give us fantastic free trade deals. Absolutely desperate to hang on to our coattails as we buccaneer around the world. We're getting free trade deals here and there. Let's be honest. The deals we're going to get, this is just utter drivel and nonsense. She's just talking drivel, isn't she?
On the US FTA, he is right. We haven't got a US FTA, but that's because the US is not doing free trade agreements with any countries. It's got nothing to do specifically with the UK. When an administration changes, we cannot control what the partner country wants to do. So instead of just moaning, what we've done is got on and signed MOUs with US states. The Minister for International Trade is not here today because he is actually on a plane to Oklahoma to sign such a deal right now. So,
well, that's it. I'm converted. I'm now a rabid-dogged Brextremist.
I'm very pleased to be able to let the House know. Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman talks about a quid pro quo. Yes, that's absolutely right. So one of the Trade Lessons 101, which I'd like to give him, is that you can't agree a trade deal where you get every single thing you want and tell the people on the other side that they can have nothing. If he has a formula for negotiating a deal where we can sell everything to other countries and they can't sell anything to us, please, he should come to the floor of the House and explain how that can be done.
In that code for, we just give them everything they want because we were just more interested in the optics. We are desperate for a trade deal.
Quid pro quo means, Madam Deputy Speaker, is having a deal that is of mutual benefit. We open our markets and they open their markets. And when the legal text is done, when we sign the agreement, there's plenty of time for Parliament to scrutinise. But he's chuntering from a sedentary position saying, what is it, what is it, what is it? I would like him to read the statement or listen to it. We have said that 99% of goods will be tariff-free. That is something that we've negotiated across all parties. We've also talked about what we get from rules of origin. And I know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that he was clearly listening to me on the radio when he heard me dispute the 0.08% figure. It is not because the figure is wrong, it's because it's doing something different from what he thinks it is. It is a model, not a forecast. And what you do with models is actually quite different from what you do with forecasts. The model which he is touting at the moment is not tailored for the specific behaviour and dynamics of the UK economy. It uses data from 2014. It excludes growth of the membership of the bloc to those who have applied. So what we shouldn't look at is the 0.08% figure. It is purely a measure of what would happen if we did not have this trade deal. That's how the model works. Models are not forecasts. Instead, what I would ask him to focus on is the facts which I have repeated time and time again, that the global middle class is going to be coming from the Indo-Pacific. 500 million consumers. By 2050, it's going to outstrip the EU. We are getting in from the ground up, and what we're going to be doing is shaping the future of the UK for future generations, not about trying to grow trade in the next 5 minutes. This is the example I used previously. This is like investing in a startup and complaining that it hasn't brought any money in as soon as you sign the agreement. We are thinking about the future, not the past, Madam Deputy Speaker. The honourable gentleman also mentioned what we are doing for the agricultural sector. I would just point to what the NFU said. The fact is that we know that British farming is not going to succeed unless we can export. We have created an exporting deal. It's not just exports, it's also services as well. All of that is going to benefit farmers and the agricultural sector to the point that the NFU has actually come out to support this deal. And I hope that that is something that members on the opposition benches can do, even though it was us who negotiated it. I would like that they would think about the country and not just about party politics. Thank you.
The irony is strong in this one, isn't it? What utter dross and nonsense. Oh, we are so screwed, aren't we?